Far beyond the familiar stars, in a corner of the galaxy few humans had ever visited, lay a frozen planet called Cryon. Its surface was endless sheets of ice, stretching as far as the eye could see. Jagged mountains rose like glass towers, reflecting the faint blue light of its distant sun. The wind howled constantly, cutting through the valleys like a sharp blade. Life on Cryon was harsh, and for most of its inhabitants, the cold shaped every part of their lives. Among the Cryons lived a girl named Lyra. Unlike many of her people, she was small and quiet, with silver blue hair that shimmered in the cold light and eyes like twin pieces of frozen sapphire. Lyra had lived her entire life on Cryon, yet she had never known real friendship. Her people were reserved and distant, their communication mostly silent through thoughts rather than words. They moved gracefully, rarely showing emotions openly. While this made them efficient and orderly, it left Lyra feeling invisible. She spent her days wandering the frozen plains, watching the sky change colors as the weak sun dipped behind icy mountains. Sometimes she would play with snow formations, shaping them carefully before the wind erased her work in seconds. It was the closest she could come to companionship, creating and then losing over and over. Lyra's parents had disappeared years ago during an expedition across the ice, leaving her completely alone. Her older brother, who had once tried to care for her, had left Cryon for a distant planet in search of new knowledge, promising to return but never coming back. Since then, Lyra had grown quiet, hiding behind a mask of cold indifference. To the others, she seemed normal, just another Cryon girl surviving in the harsh environment. But inside, a hollow loneliness grew, day by day deep and unshakable. She often sat on a cliff overlooking the frozen plains, staring at the horizon. The ice stretched endlessly, white and unbroken, reflecting the pale light of Cryon's twin moons. Sometimes she whispered words to herself, but the wind carried them away before anyone could hear. The only sounds were the ice cracking in the distance, the howl of the wind, and the faint hum of the planet itself. Lyra had accepted that this emptiness was her life. She did not expect it to change. Then one day, strange lights appeared in the sky. At first, Lyra thought it was another aurora, one of the rare but beautiful displays that painted Cryon's skies in green and blue waves. But these lights moved differently, steady, purposeful, descending rapidly toward the frozen surface. Curious despite herself, Lyra ran toward the landing site, her boots crunching in the snow, heart beating faster than it had in years. The lights came from a spacecraft, unlike anything she had ever seen. It was sleek and silver, with smooth curves and glowing engines that burned bright against the icy backdrop. The craft landed gently, sending a plume of snow into the air, and a ramp extended from its base. Lyra stayed hidden behind a ridge, peering cautiously. She had heard stories of humans, travelers from distant planets, but she had never met one. The first figure to step out of the spacecraft was tall and strong, wearing a suit that reflected the weak sun. His hair was dark and his eyes were curious, scanning the world around him. Lyra watched silently as he took cautious steps onto the ice, examining the frozen terrain. He moved with care, yet there was an energy about him, a confidence that seemed to belong to another world entirely. "Captain Aiden," the figure said into a small device on his wrist. His voice carried clearly in the cold air, full of warmth and life. "The readings are off the charts. Cryon is colder than expected, but the atmosphere is stable." Proceeding to scan the surrounding area, Lyra had never heard a voice like that. It was full of emotion, full of curiosity. It was so different from the quiet, thought-based communication of her people. She felt a strange pull, something she could not understand. It was as if this human, whoever he was, had a warmth that cut through the cold surrounding her heart. For days, Captain Aiden explored the icy plains, taking readings and documenting strange ice formations, rare crystals, and patterns in the frozen winds. Lyra followed from a distance, invisible among the snowdrifts. She watched him as he carefully examined the ice, talking to himself, sometimes laughing when a tool didn't work properly. He was unlike any Cryon she had ever seen. He was alive in a way her people were not. One evening, after a long day of exploration, Aiden paused near a cliff overlooking a frozen lake. The sky was painted with the aurora, green and blue waves dancing across the darkening horizon. He knelt down, brushing snow off a strange ice crystal. "This is beautiful," he whispered. "I've never seen anything like it. Amazing." Lyra felt a pang of something unfamiliar in her chest. She had always walked these lands alone, never thinking anyone could appreciate them. Yet here was someone who not only saw the beauty but felt it too. Her curiosity overcame her caution, and she stepped out from behind her hiding place, her silver-blue hair catching the aurora's light. Aiden looked up immediately. His eyes widened, not in fear but in surprise. "Hello?" he said softly, raising a hand in greeting. "I didn't think anyone lived out here, especially not alone." Lyra hesitated, unsure what to do. She wanted to run, to hide behind the wall she had built around herself for years, but something about Aiden made her pause. He did not seem dangerous. His voice was warm and his eyes were kind. Slowly, she stepped closer, letting the snow crunch softly under her feet. You are not like the others," she said finally, her voice quiet, almost swallowed by the wind. Aiden smiled gently. "I suppose I'm not. I'm human. And you are?" "Lyra," she said. "I live here, alone." "Alone?" Aiden asked, his brow furrowed in concern. "You've been alone here your whole life?" Lyra nodded, looking down at her boots. She wanted to look away, but something in Aiden's gaze made her hold his eyes. "My parents, they are gone. My brother, he left." Her voice broke slightly. I have no one." Aiden's expression softened. He crouched slightly to be closer to her level. "That sounds very lonely, but you don't have to be alone anymore, Lyra. Not if you don't want to." Lyra felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She had never heard words like this before. Cryons rarely said such things, and even if they did, they meant little. But this human, he meant them. She wanted to believe him, but fear and habit pulled her back. I don't know," she whispered. "People here, they don't care about me." Aiden shook his head gently. "That's not true. I care, I can see you. I can see who you really are, Lyra. Not just the walls you've built around yourself." For the first time in years, Lyra felt something stir inside her. A tiny spark of hope. Fragile, but undeniable. She wanted to trust him, but she didn't know if she could. The ice inside her heart had been frozen for so long it might never thaw. Yet looking at Aiden, she felt the faintest warmth, as if sunlight had reached the deepest part of her being. The wind picked up, swirling snow around them in icy gusts. Lyra shivered, but not from the cold. She realized that, despite the loneliness she had accepted for so long, something had changed. Someone had seen past her ice. Someone had noticed her. Aiden extended his hand. "Come on," he said softly. "Let me show you something. It's beautiful out here, and you shouldn't have to face it alone." Lyra hesitated. Then slowly she took his hand. The contact was gentle but firm, grounding her in a way she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know where this would lead, or if she would ever truly trust him. But for the first time, she felt the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to be alone anymore. Together, they walked along the edge of the frozen lake, watching the aurora ripple across the sky. Lyra kept her eyes on the colors above, but she could feel Aiden's presence beside her, steady, warm, and real. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Sometimes just being seen was enough. For the first time in her life, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a world where loneliness was not endless. The ice around her heart had begun to crack, tiny lines appearing in places she had thought forever frozen. She did not know how much of the ice would melt, or if it would ever disappear entirely. But she knew one thing. Someone had seen past it, and that was the first step towards something she had never dared to hope for: connection. As the aurora danced above them, Lyra allowed herself to smile just a little, and the wind carried her laughter across the frozen plains. The sound was faint, yet it felt powerful, like the first note of a song long forgotten. And for the first time, the endless ice of Cryon felt a little less lonely. The days following Captain Aiden's arrival passed like a slow thaw across Lyra's frozen world. She did not speak much at first, retreating to the shadows of her icy home, watching the human move with curious energy across the frozen plains. He explored, measured, and recorded with a passion she had never seen in a Cryon. He laughed at small mistakes, and he marveled at even the tiniest wonders the ice offered. Each time she watched, Lyra felt something inside her shift, though she could not name it. Aiden, however, did not leave her alone. Unlike her people, who valued distance and silence, he had a warmth that sought connection. He left small gifts in the snow, colored crystals, tools that could make patterns in ice, and little sketches he drew in the frost. At first, Lyra ignored them, wary and suspicious. But curiosity eventually overcame her caution. She picked up one of his sketches, a simple drawing of the frozen plains, but alive with color and life, and felt a strange tug at her heart. One evening, as the twin moons rose over Cryon, Lyra decided to follow him. She found him kneeling beside a crevice in the ice, examining the way moonlight passed through frozen crystals embedded in the wall. "Look at this," he said softly, though he knew no one was listening. "It's like the ice itself is glowing. Isn't it beautiful?" Lyra stepped closer, her boots crunching on the frost. "It is," she whispered almost to herself. The words startled her. It had been years since she had spoken to anyone. The sound of her own voice felt strange, unfamiliar, yet comforting. Aiden turned at the sound and smiled gently. "Ah, there you are. I thought you might be watching." His voice was patient, kind, without any pressure. "Come, look at this with me." For the first time, Lyra did not pull away. She crouched beside him, careful not to touch him, but close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. Together, they watched the light pass through the ice, casting a soft glow around them. The silence was comfortable, filled with the quiet hum of the planet, the soft crackle of shifting ice, and the faint sound of their breathing. You're not like the others," Lyra finally said, breaking the silence. "The Cryons, they do not care." Her words were halting like ice cracking under pressure. Aiden nodded slowly. "I can see that. But not all beings are the same, Lyra. Some of us care very much." Her heart skipped a beat. The words were simple, yet they carried weight. She wanted to trust him, wanted to believe that someone could care about her. But fear and old habits tugged at her, whispering that she would be hurt if she tried. "You will not leave me?" she asked quietly. Aiden's smile was gentle but steady. "No, I will not leave you. Not while you are still alone here." That night, Lyra did not return to her hidden dwelling. Instead, she stayed near the landing site, watching the stars reflect on the ice. Aiden sat nearby, sketching shapes in the snow with a small metal stick. At first, Lyra only watched, but eventually she picked up a stick herself. Tentatively, she drew beside him, copying the shapes he made. Her lines were uneven, imperfect, but Aiden did not correct her. He merely nodded, encouraging her with quiet gestures. By the next morning, Lyra had begun to anticipate his presence. She no longer fled to the shadows when he approached. Sometimes she would speak to him softly at first, asking questions about Earth and humans. Do you have snow there?" she asked one morning, tilting her head. Aiden laughed, a bright melodic sound that carried across the frozen plains. "We do, but our snow is warmer than Cryon's. You can walk in it without feeling your toes freeze off most of the time." Lyra giggled quietly, hiding her smile behind her hand. She had not laughed like that in years, not since she had been a little girl playing among her parents' experiments. The sound felt strange and wonderful in her own ears, a melody she had almost forgotten. Over the next week, Aiden taught Lyra about Earth. He spoke of oceans that stretched farther than she could imagine, of forests that whispered in the wind, and cities filled with light and sound. Lyra listened with wide eyes, absorbing every word. She was fascinated not only by the stories but by the emotions behind them, the joy, the wonder, the laughter, and even the sadness. One afternoon, Aiden took her to a nearby ice cavern, a place she had never dared to enter alone. The walls sparkled like crystal, reflecting the faint sunlight into a rainbow of colors. "It's beautiful," Lyra whispered, stepping cautiously on the slippery floor. "Not as beautiful as your world," Aiden said sincerely. "But yes, it has its own magic." Lyra paused, surprised. She had always thought of Cryon as lonely, cold, and empty. But hearing Aiden speak, she began to see it differently. The ice, the snow, the jagged mountains, they were harsh, yes, but also magnificent. Her world had always been a prison to her, and yet now, with someone to share it, it felt alive. They spent hours in the cavern, sharing stories and discovering strange patterns in the ice. Aiden showed Lyra how to create small ice sculptures, forming shapes that glowed faintly in the light. Lyra laughed as some collapsed under her hands, the ice shards scattering like tiny stars. Aiden never scolded her. He only encouraged her, showing her that mistakes were part of learning. It was during these moments that Lyra felt the first real cracks in the ice surrounding her heart. She began to trust him, to allow herself to feel something she had long buried: hope. She realized that perhaps she did not have to be alone forever. Perhaps someone could care for her even across worlds, even across species. But the ice around her was still strong. Lyra did not forget the fear of being hurt, the memory of abandonment or the quiet loneliness that had been her companion for so long. Every time she let a small warmth into her heart, a shadow of doubt would creep in, reminding her of the pain of trusting and losing. One night, as the aurora danced across the sky, Aiden sat beside her on a ridge overlooking the plains. He spoke softly, telling her about a human tradition called storytelling, where people shared their lives through words, drawings, and songs. "It's how we connect," he explained. "Even if we are far apart, even if we are different, sharing a story brings us closer." Lyra listened, intrigued. She had never told her own story, not to her people, not even to herself. Her life had been full of silence, and she did not know if anyone could truly understand. But there was something in Aiden's presence, something warm and patient that made her want to try. Slowly, hesitantly, she began to speak. She told him about her parents, about her brother, about the cold and lonely days she had spent wandering Cryon. Her voice trembled at first, then grew steadier as Aiden listened without interruption, without judgment. When she finished, there were tears in her eyes, but also a strange feeling of relief. The words had been locked inside her for so long, and now they were spoken, heard, acknowledged. Aiden reached out, gently brushing a strand of silver-blue hair from her face. "Thank you for sharing that with me," he said softly. "I can see how strong you are, Lyra. Even alone you survived. Even alone you kept hope alive. That is remarkable." Lyra looked at him, unsure if she deserved such praise. I don't feel strong," she admitted. "I feel frozen inside. You are stronger than you know," Aiden said firmly. "Humans survive difficult worlds too. We fall, we get hurt, we make mistakes, but we keep going. That is what makes us human. And I think it is the same for you. You have survived Cryon, survived your loneliness, and now you are opening your heart. That takes courage." The words sank into her like sunlight on ice. For the first time, Lyra considered the possibility that her loneliness was not eternal, that perhaps with someone like Aiden she could feel warmth again, could laugh again, could belong. Over the next few days, their bond grew stronger. Lyra no longer stayed hidden. She joined Aiden on his explorations, learned to climb ice cliffs, and even helped him catalog strange crystal formations. She laughed freely, asked questions without fear, and allowed herself to feel curiosity, wonder, and excitement. Yet, as much as she enjoyed Aiden's presence, a small part of her still hesitated. Trust was not easily given, and the ice of her heart was still thick in places, but the cracks were there, small and fragile, and that was enough for now. Enough to let warmth seep through, enough to let hope take root. One evening, as the twin moons rose over Cryon, Lyra and Aiden sat together on a ridge, looking over the frozen plains. "Do you think it's possible?" Lyra asked quietly. "To be alone and not feel lonely?" Aiden smiled, glancing at her with soft eyes. "I think it is. But sometimes it takes someone to show you the way, someone to care enough to help you see it." Lyra looked down at her hands clasped tightly together. She did not speak, but she felt a small warmth in her chest, the beginnings of trust, the beginnings of hope. Perhaps her endless loneliness could end. Perhaps the ice inside her could slowly thaw, and as the aurora shimmered above them, painting the frozen plains in brilliant colors, Lyra allowed herself to believe, for the first time in many years, that she might not be alone forever. The icy wind of Cryon had always been Lyra's companion, constant and unyielding, but now the presence of Captain Aiden beside her made even the harshest storms feel less frightening. They had grown used to each other's company over the past weeks. Aiden's laughter, his curiosity, and his patience had slowly begun to melt the walls Lyra had built around her heart. Yet despite this growing bond, Lyra knew that the planet was unpredictable. Cryon had a beauty that could charm, but it also had a danger that could kill. One morning, Aiden called to Lyra from the edge of a frozen cliff. "Lyra, come quickly. I found something extraordinary." His voice echoed over the icy plains. Lyra hurried to him, boots crunching in the thick snow, her silver-blue hair catching the sunlight. At the edge of the cliff, a massive ice fissure stretched for hundreds of meters, shimmering with colors from the sunlight refracting through the cracks. "It's a glacial rift," Aiden explained, crouching to examine the ice. There may be rare crystals or minerals inside, but it's unstable. We need to be careful. Lyra peered into the fissure, awe mixing with fear. The depth was dizzying and the ice around it looked fragile. Her instincts screamed for her to stay back, but she also felt a strange thrill at seeing the world from a new perspective. For the first time, fear was not paralyzing, it was part of the adventure. I'll go first, Aiden said. I'll check the edges for weak spots. Then we can go together. He moved carefully, testing each step, his movements precise yet confident. Lyra watched closely, noticing how he calculated risks, how he respected the environment. She realized humans had a bravery she had never seen in her own people, an ability to face danger with both caution and determination. Be careful, she called, her voice trembling slightly. I always am, he replied with a reassuring smile. But I also know that fear can be useful. It keeps us alive. Lyra followed him cautiously as they descended into the fissure. The walls sparkled with embedded crystals casting colored light across the ice. The beauty was breathtaking, but every step carried a risk. Small cracks threatened to break and icy fragments fell into the depths below. Lyra's heart raced and she realized she was relying on Aiden to guide her. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the fissure. A piece of ice broke from the wall, tumbling downward with a deafening roar. Lyra froze, her breath catching in her throat. Aiden quickly steadied her, holding her hand firmly. Stay calm, he whispered. We can move carefully. Trust me. Lyra felt a surge of fear, but also a strange sense of security. For the first time, she realized that trust was not weakness, it was strength. She had been alone for so long, surviving entirely by herself, yet in this moment, letting someone guide her made her feel stronger, not weaker. Together they navigated the fissure, moving slowly and deliberately. Lyra noticed how Aiden's eyes never left her, how he adjusted his steps to match hers, always ensuring she was safe. The ice around them creaked and shifted, but with each step, Lyra's confidence grew. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite it. After hours of careful exploration, they reached a small cavern, deep within the fissure. The walls glittered with rare cryon crystals, pulsating faintly with an inner light. Lyra's eyes widened in wonder. She had never seen anything so beautiful. It's incredible, she whispered, touching a crystal gently. The light reflected in her eyes, making them sparkle like stars. Aiden smiled. Yes, and look, you made it here. You faced your fear, Lyra. That's remarkable. Lyra's chest swelled with pride, but also a quiet realization. She had never trusted anyone fully before. Yet here, in the depths of a dangerous ice fissure, she had relied on Aiden completely, and survived. The experience was both terrifying and exhilarating, and she felt a small shift inside her. She was no longer entirely alone, but Cryon was not done testing them. As they prepared to leave the cavern, a sudden tremor shook the ice. Small pieces broke off the walls and ceiling, sending shards clattering around them. Lyra froze, panic rising like a storm inside her. What do we do? She cried, her voice trembling. Aiden grabbed her hand firmly. We move together. Step carefully, follow me, and trust me. Lyra's heart pounded, but she nodded, placing her faith in him. They navigated the collapsing cavern with careful steps, ducking under falling ice and sliding across narrow paths. At one point, Lyra slipped on a slick patch, but Aiden caught her immediately. You're okay, he said softly. I've got you, the words echoed in Lyra's mind. For years, no one had said such things to her. No one had promised to protect her, to stand by her side. And now, in the midst of danger, she understood the truth of them. She was not weak for needing help. She was brave for accepting it. Finally, after what felt like hours, they emerged from the fissure. The cold air of the open plains hit them, and Lyra gasped, her lungs filling with the crisp freshness of Cryon. She looked at Aiden, her silver blue hair dusted with ice, eyes wide with awe and relief. We made it, she whispered. Aiden smiled, brushing snow from his shoulders. Yes, we did. And you were incredible. You faced fear that most beings would never survive. Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she realized that courage could be shared. Humans had this unique ability to lift others up, to inspire strength even in the most frightened hearts. And now she felt it too. She was still learning, still fragile in places, but the ice inside her heart had begun to crack in ways she had never imagined. Over the next few days, Lyra and Aiden continued their explorations. They climbed icy cliffs, mapped hidden valleys, and discovered caves filled with rare crystals. Lyra grew more confident with each step, learning to rely on her instincts and trust Aiden's guidance. She laughed freely, asked questions without fear, and allowed herself to feel excitement and wonder. But Cryon was not just a beautiful, frozen world. Danger lurked in hidden corners. One evening, as they traversed a narrow ice bridge over a deep canyon, a sudden storm swept across the plains. The wind howled like a living thing, carrying snow and shards of ice. Visibility dropped to almost nothing and the temperature plummeted. "Lyra, hold on," Aiden shouted, gripping her hand tightly. The storm threatened to throw them off balance, and the ice beneath their feet creaked alarmingly. Lyra's heart raced, fear clawing at her throat. She wanted to run, to hide, to escape, but she could not leave Aiden. They had faced so much together, and she knew they could survive if they worked as one. Step by step, hand in hand, they crossed the bridge. Lyra felt every gust of wind, every tremor of the ice, yet she also felt a strange exhilaration. Fear no longer paralyzed her. It sharpened her senses, made her focus, made her aware of her own strength and the strength she could draw from Aiden's presence. When they finally reached the other side, Lyra collapsed onto the snow, gasping for breath. Aiden knelt beside her, brushing snow from her hair. "You did it," he said softly. "You faced the storm, and you survived." Lyra looked at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of exhaustion and awe. I couldn't have done it alone," she admitted. "You didn't have to," Aiden replied. "That's what makes us strong. We don't face the world alone. We help each other, and together we can survive anything." Lyra felt a quiet warmth in her chest, deeper than anything she had ever known. She realized that human courage was not just about bravery in the face of danger. It was about connection, trust, and empathy. It was about being willing to stand beside someone else, to share their fear and hope alike. That night, as the storm raged outside, Lyra sat close to Aiden near a small fire he had managed to light inside their temporary shelter. The warmth seeped into her frozen limbs, but it also reached the ice around her heart. She realized that fear, when faced with someone she trusted, could become a bridge, not a barrier. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to hope. Not just for survival, not just for safety, but for something more. She could feel the possibility of friendship, of companionship, of trust blossoming inside her. And though the ice inside her had not completely melted, she knew it was beginning to thaw. As the aurora shimmered faintly through the cracks in the ice above, Lyra leaned slightly closer to Aiden. She did not speak, but she did not need to. Their shared experiences, the fear, the courage, the trust, had spoken louder than words ever could. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt truly seen. And that was a beginning. The weeks on Cryon had changed Lyra in ways she had never imagined. The ice that had always surrounded her heart, the loneliness, the fear, the habit of isolation was slowly melting. Each day with Captain Aiden had shown her a world beyond fear, a world where warmth, trust, and companionship existed even on a frozen planet. And now Lyra felt ready to face something she had never dared before, sharing the deepest parts of herself without hiding. It began one quiet morning. The twin suns of Cryon had barely risen, painting the frozen plains in soft gold and blue light. Lyra stood on a ridge watching the sunlight reflect on the ice, casting tiny rainbows that danced across the snow. She felt a tug in her chest, a desire to speak, to reach out not just physically but emotionally. Aiden appeared beside her, carrying a small pack filled with tools and supplies for the day's exploration. "Good morning," he said with a smile, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Ready to discover something new?" Lyra nodded, trying to match his enthusiasm, though her voice felt strange in her throat. "Yes, I want to see more of the plains." Together they traveled across the icy landscape, venturing farther than Lyra had ever dared to go alone. They climbed over frozen ridges, slid down steep slopes, and crossed sparkling ice fields where the snow crunched beneath their feet. Every step was an adventure, but it was no longer frightening. With Aiden by her side, Lyra felt capable, alive, and for the first time, not alone. At one point, they reached a small valley surrounded by jagged ice cliffs. Crystals embedded in the walls reflected the sunlight, creating a kaleidoscope of colors across the snow. Lyra gasped in awe. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her breath catching. Aiden crouched beside her, Yes, it is. But not as beautiful as your world, Lyra. You've survived here alone, and you've made this place your home. That is incredible. Lyra looked down, unsure how to respond. Compliments from others were rare for her. Her people never praised emotions or effort. They only expected survival. But Aiden's words were different. They carried warmth, meaning, and sincerity. I don't know if I deserve that, she admitted quietly. I've always felt invisible. Aiden shook his head gently. You're not invisible. Not to me, not anymore. I can see you, Lyra. All of you, the strength, the curiosity, the loneliness, and the hope. You are remarkable, and I'm honored to know you. Her chest tightened, and for a moment she felt a surge of emotion that almost frightened her. She wanted to trust him completely, to believe his words, but old fears whispered that she could be hurt if she let herself. Still, the ice around her heart had thinned enough that she could let a small warmth in. Later that day, as they explored deeper into the valley, Lyra began to speak of her past. She told Aiden about her parents, the expeditions that had taken them from her, and her brother's departure. She spoke of her years of wandering alone, of nights spent staring at the aurora and wishing for someone to notice her. Aiden listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. His attention made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced. You've been through so much, he said gently when she paused, and yet here you are, still exploring, still surviving, still seeking connection. That takes courage beyond measure. Lyra looked at him, tears threatening to spill. I don't know if I am brave. I've been alone for so long. I only survived because I had no choice. Bravery isn't only about choice, Aiden said softly. It's about facing life even when it's hard, even when you feel afraid. You've done that every day. That makes you strong, Lyra. That makes you remarkable. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to believe that someone could truly see her, not just the walls she had built, not just the ice she had surrounded herself with. She felt her heart stir, fragile but alive. That evening, as the twin moons rose over Cryon, Lyra and Aiden returned to the landing site. The air was calm, the wind softened, and the snow glimmered like diamonds under the moonlight. Lyra sat on a small mound of ice, watching the reflection of the moons in a frozen pond. Aiden sat beside her, sharing a simple meal from his pack. I never thought I would find someone like you here, he said quietly. Not just a companion, but someone who can teach me about this world, and about courage and about trust. Lyra looked at him, a small smile forming on her lips. You think I can teach you? Absolutely, Aiden said, smiling warmly. Humans can teach courage and hope, but Cryons, especially someone like you, can teach resilience and patience. You've endured so much, Lyra. That makes you wise beyond your years. Her chest tightened, a mixture of pride and emotion she had never felt before. She realized that trust was not just about relying on someone else. It was about letting someone see your true self and believing they would not hurt you. She wanted to believe that, and she did. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra's world continued to change. She laughed more freely, shared her thoughts openly, and even began teaching Aiden about Cryon's landscapes, its hidden paths, and the delicate balance of its frozen ecosystem. Their companionship grew deeper, stronger, and more trusting. One day, while exploring a canyon filled with sparkling ice spires, Lyra paused to look at Aiden. Do you ever feel lonely? She asked softly. Aiden thought for a moment, looking at the frozen spires. Sometimes, yes. But I've learned that loneliness can be eased by connection, by finding someone who understands, who cares. And now I think I've found that here, with you. Lyra's heart thudded. She had never felt so seen, so understood. The ice inside her felt as if it had melted further, leaving a warmth that spread through her chest. She realized that humans had a unique strength, not just physical courage, but emotional courage. The ability to care deeply and connect fully. As they continued their journey, they encountered a small group of Cryons observing them from a distance. Lyra froze, unsure how to react. Her people rarely showed interest in outsiders, and she feared they would disapprove of her companionship with Aiden. But Aiden stood calmly beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. One of the Cryons stepped forward, curious but cautious. Lyra felt her chest tighten, ready to retreat. But then she realized something important. She did not need to hide. She had trusted Aiden, faced danger, and shared her deepest fears with him. The ice around her heart had thinned enough that she could face others with confidence. She straightened, meeting the Cryon's gaze. "This is Aiden," she said firmly. "He is my friend, and I am not afraid to trust him." The Cryon studied her silently, then slowly nodded before stepping back. Lyra felt a surge of pride. She had faced fear, embraced trust, and chosen connection over isolation. The ice within her had not only thawed, it had strengthened her, giving her courage and hope. That night, as the aurora painted the sky with brilliant colors, Lyra and Aiden sat together on a ridge, looking out over the frozen plains. Lyra leaned slightly closer, feeling the warmth of their shared presence. I never thought I would feel this way," she admitted softly. "Alive, connected, seen." Aiden smiled, gently brushing snow from her hair. "You deserve it, Lyra. You've endured so much, and yet you've chosen to open your heart. That is the true courage, the courage to trust, to feel, and to connect." Lyra allowed herself to close her eyes for a moment, savoring the warmth, the trust, and the companionship. She realized that loneliness did not have to define her. The ice inside her heart had thawed, not completely, but enough to let warmth and hope grow. For the first time in her life, Lyra believed that she could belong, not just survive. She could laugh, explore, and connect. She could trust and be trusted. She could live fully, with courage and hope. As the night sky shimmered above Cryon, Lyra opened her eyes and looked at Aiden. "Thank you," she whispered. "For seeing me?" Aiden smiled warmly, placing a hand gently on hers. "I always have, Lyra, and I always will." In that moment, Lyra felt a quiet certainty. She had faced the endless loneliness of her life and chosen connection, courage, and hope. The ice that had held her heart captive had finally begun to melt, leaving room for warmth, trust, and the possibility of a future filled with companionship. And as the aurora danced across the sky, painting the frozen world with light and color, Lyra allowed herself to dream for the first time of a life where she was never truly alone.